change the world.
On we go.
Hello, welcome back to Coffee Over Apples. My name is Steph, and this is my October wrap-up video. October was a little bit of an interesting month for me. I'm going to start off by giving you my overall stats and then telling you which books, as I'm reviewing them, are going to get an independent review in the next couple of weeks. And I don't know. October had a very high average rating, but also left me feeling kind of slumpy. And I think it's because I gave these books 110% of my brain energy, okay? So here's some stats right off of my story graph. I technically finished only 3 books this month. And I DNF'd one. I also am in the middle of another one. So let's talk about the books that I finish in accordance with the other stats. I read a total of 1,381 pages, and again, that's not counting the pages of the book that I DNF'd, and that's not counting the book that I'm in the middle of that I'll also be talking about. This is definitely a low reading month for me. I think I usually average closer to about 2,000 pages a month and or 5 to 6 books. However, one of the books that I read this month in October was a chunker of a book, and it took me like 3 weeks to get through, and when I talk about it, you'll understand a lot more why. My most popular genres that I read in October, even though this is only accounting for 3 books, is speculative fiction, classics, LGBTQIA+, even though that's not technically a genre, but that's what Storygraph counts it as, sci-fi, romance, mystery, horror and fantasy. I really think horror should be at the top of this list, but whatever, that's just my opinion. And my overall rating for the month of October was a 4.17. So that's really good. Of these 3 books, I rated 1 a 4-star and 2 4.2 stars. So let's talk about the 4-star first, since that's the only one that's in that category. My 4-star book of October is House of Leaves. And when I tell you that this doesn't feel accurate for how much I enjoyed this book, but I'm giving it 4 stars because I have some critical feelings about it, and I'm stuck in this limbo between I absolutely love and adore House of Leaves, but also it gave me such a headache. This book feels made for me, and I still think it is. I've been flipping back and forth between giving this book a 5-star and a 4-star this entire time since I finished it about 3 weeks ago. And because of that, maybe it should technically settle on a 4.5. I tabbed this book a lot. If you've never heard of House of Leaves, for some reason, it is, I think by this point, should be considered a classic horror. It's a book about a book about a book about a movie. This is ultimately a haunted house story, right? The Davidson record is a story or a film about a family that moves into a house, and this house is clearly haunted because out of nowhere, a door in their living room opens up to a dark hallway, and that hallway looks like it should stretch really far, but when you stick your head out the window that's next to the door, the wall ends and there's the backyard. So where does this hallway lead? And it's so unsettling, right? Our technically main character, I guess, because you have Davidson, who is the guy who owns the house, and he's a photojournalist, so he is obsessed with figuring out what this house is about. And then you have Johnny, who is this self-loathing person, young man in 1995 or 96 or something. I could be 98, I don't even know. Who just delves into drugs and alcohol and is clearly a sex addict because he wants to escape his demons, and he kind of finds this manuscript and becomes obsessed with it. So that happens, and then the person who he got the manuscript is an old man who was blind, who died, and so Johnny takes the manuscript, but he also sees something really wrong with the way that this old man was living when he found the manuscript. So it's like all these layers of these different men who are becoming obsessed with documentation of this place. And there's so many layers here that you're following, because you have two stories that are kind of happening. You have the main script, which is the story of, that almost reads as a critical analysis of this, what is considered popularly in this world, which doesn't even sound accurate to say, because that's exactly what's being contested here. A critical analysis of a film that is considered to be an art piece. But the way that that critical analysis is written is that this art piece exists, and the person who is analyzing or annotating that critical analysis says that that artwork film does not exist. So who's telling the truth? And it's really weird, because it's like, so there's a lot of pages that are kind of like cut in half, and I'm trying to find a good example to show you, because we have the annotations of the person who is trying to learn about this film in the footnotes. There's footnotes, and there are letters, and this is a mixed media format book, so there's pictures, there's letters, there's testimonies by all of these people who say that they've seen this thing, but for some reason it's just not recorded anywhere, and the original film cannot be found. So we learn about this film through the writing of an individual who analyzed it, even though they're blind. And so their obsession with this film that they technically cannot see is that the more you learn about it, the kind of more haunted you might become, depending on your level of consumption. And that may or may not happen. It's very, very interesting. And it's masterfully done. Again, just talking to you about this, I feel like I need to give this 5 stars. However, this book took so long to get through that it just kind of dampened my experience. And while I know that there are certain sections in which certain characters are criticized for their level of like anti-feminist rhetoric, and so the female characters in here kind of like serve a specific purpose to not only be the like classic damsel in distress, but also criticized for being so by the art critics that are reviewing that media. And it's like things that I wanted to happen, I would say didn't necessarily happen. Like there's certain reviews in that case of analysis that I would have liked to see happen a little bit farther, if the whole point of this is to give us something in which we can divvy out into all forms and fashions of critique, ultimately to say that none of them may be correct. I'm trying to tell you what this is about without giving it away, and it's so hard. I think that in correlation with what I was saying about what this does with critique, you may be able, if you know anything about my taste and that I tend to lean more feminist, that this doesn't necessarily, I think, have as well a critique of the women who play a pivotal role in the story as much as it does of the men. But that being said, the critique that does happen is splendidly enjoyable if you can get past the pretentiousness. Also, I could not stand Johnny. But again, he is supposed to be an unlikable character. So if you don't like him, chances are that you're reading this correctly. I think this is definitely going to need its own independent review because I don't know what this video is going to edit down to, but apparently I've been talking at my camera for about 12 minutes now, and a good 75% of that has been about House of Leaves. So I'm going to save the rest of my thoughts for an independent review, which you can expect to happen in November. Maybe I should just bump this up to a 5 stars. I don't know. A very good time, but still should not have taken me close to 4 weeks to read it. Moving into my one of my 4.25 reads. This series is so wonderful. This is the Lore and Lust Volume 2, The Vanishing. It is a vampire romance that I think is done splendidly well. It is so wholesome in the sense that we have characters who have a very meaningful relationship with each other. I did an entire independent review for this on my TikTok, which is linked in the description if you want to see that. I don't think that this book is necessarily going to get an independent review on my channel on YouTube until I finish the 3rd book in this series. But Karla Nikole is an independently published writer, and I highly want you to support this author because it is some of the best vampire erotic fiction that I've read in a long time. So book 1 is about these 2 main characters, these 2 purebred vampires that are one of the only 2 purebred vampires that are left in all of Europe after something called the Vanishing happened a long time ago, like 200 years ago or something like that. And they fall in love, and their journey of healing is so wonderful. The way that the vampire world is established here, their system of hierarchy, and the way that vampires just can't go around mating with humans, because most of the vampire stories that are popular or mainstream are about human vampire relationships, and this kind of breaks that and says that's actually not healthy. Vampires need blood, but they need a certain kind of blood to be able to function and maintain their bodies, just like humans can't just take blood donations from anybody, neither can they. So that really falls into it. And then, so the reason that it's titled Lore and Lust is because the main character of book 1, who is this character in book 2's partner, sorry about the spoiler, that they're writing a book documenting the mating patterns of vampires throughout generations by going to interview people and speak to people so that they can learn to understand how it is that the vampire bonding happens, because once 2 vampires are bonded in a certain way, that bond cannot be broken, otherwise it might kill the partner. So they are like physically, chemically linked to each other because they become each other's blood source. So that is such a great premise to start from, knowing that that is what happens. So what then the question then becomes like, what happens if someone gets a divorce? What happens if someone's partner passes away? What happens to their children? And so it's just so like beautiful. I am very happy with the series. I would not say that it's like action packed. So if you're looking for an action packed romance, I feel even weird saying that, action packed romance, because that's not what I go into romance for. But it is an adult vampire, so it does have some erotic moments in here, and there is a lot of conversation about consent, and it is beautiful. The first book was just about this gay couple, and the second book is about the gay couple plus like their cousins and other vampires in their community who is a straight couple. I don't know what book 3 is about, but I'm gonna assume this book was really about like what happened with the Vanishing, and I'm assuming book 3 might be like post-resolution from that. I'm not really sure, but we'll see. You will be getting another review for the 3rd book eventually, and once I read all 3 books, since I have one left, I will just do a big like series review for this on my channel. So let me know if that's something you want me to prioritize. I probably got to put the third book on my wish list because I need to get a copy of it, and I do need to support this author by getting physical copies. Successful horror-themed romance for October. The other book that I read that was a 4.25 stars was The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Guin. I really enjoyed this. This was the pick for the sci-fi book club that I run on Discord. So again, if you want to join that and you're new to my channel, the link is in the description below. However, when I suggested this for our poll and it won, I was like, wow, that's really exciting that something that I picked won. And I was a little bit nervous because it's a classic sci-fi, right? And sometimes classic sci-fis don't always hit for me, but this was really wonderful. I see now why there are a lot of things in here that can be criticized, because this was written 50 years ago. And what I enjoyed about this was that it starts off as a quintessential sci-fi in the sense that we have a male main character who is on a particular mission to go to this other world and kind of meet these aliens and pull them into human civilization, right? So there's story in here about colonization and being the individual who initiates that colonizing upon said individual. But what's interesting about this is that the planet that they're on, humans went there thousands of years ago, to the point where humans eventually lost contact, I believe, with the central galactic entity that is other planets in which humans have maintained some sort of economic status and then have evolved. So this person comes as an emissary to meet these people and bring them back into the fold of humanity. But they are very sexually and gender different in the sense that they are what we might now call gender fluid or trans peoples. With a modern lens looking at this, Ursula K. Guin at the time, I don't necessarily know if she had that language or knowledge to be able to explain it the way that we do now. And that being said, being that these individuals are being judged by the person who is the emissary, we're getting it from this heteronormative view, and they're questioning, like, why are these people bisexual? But the word bisexual is not being used in the context that we use it now. So I think that the people of this planet are pictured as pansexual, but just because someone is bisexual or transgender or gender fluid does not necessarily mean that they are pansexual. So we learn about these peoples through this main character whose viewpoints on heteronormativity are being challenged because of their mission to understand these people and pass judgment as to whether they can be folded into the rest of human society. And what I liked about this was, although the conversation of colonialism still needs to be resolved in this series, because this is book 4 out of a series, and while I read this as a standalone, I will say you do not need to read the rest of the series in order to be able to appreciate this book. That conversation is being saved for later, but this character's personal views about gender hierarchy and sexism and all of those things are being challenged, and we see that paradigm shift in them when they become emotionally attached to someone in this book, and they have open dialogue about it. And that's the part that I really loved, because for something that was written 50 years ago, I was kind of expecting a lot of those things to not be challenged, like maybe mentioned at least, because I know that this is very popular for being something that is that really broke ground as far as like feminist sci-fi, but I didn't know to what degree. And while it could be more, and the author herself has said like there are mistakes here, I was still really happy to see that those conversations happened in some positive way. And I liked that we were able to see like that moment when someone kind of has that flip switch and then say like, well, I was wrong. Like they were being a bigot or whatever the case may be. And what are they going to do to change that? So what ultimately happens in the end, while I might call this a tragedy, I guess, there's still something that character does that brought my heart a little bit of joy. So again, I think that this is going to end up getting its own independent review because there's so much to say about this book. And I see why this was so groundbreaking in 1969 or 1970 or whenever this came out, because it's something that I wished a lot of other classic sci-fi did. So there's that. I am probably officially an Ursula K. Guin stan, but so is probably most of the sci-fi world anyway. So there's that. Let's move on to a book that I DNF'd. This is Syster, Maiden, Monster. I struggled with this book, and not because it's bad. I don't know if it's good, honestly, and I don't think I read enough of it to count it as read. It's very interesting, okay? What I can't do is read fiction that revolves around a base of horrific events that I am just a little too close to for comfort. Our jumping off point is the pandemic. And our first story in here, because this is supposed to be about 3 different women who become like murderous and things happen. It's a horror, right? When our first character in our first story falls sick to a second pandemic, when our first character in our first story falls ill to a second pandemic, which takes place not long after the one that we just experienced, it just made me a little uncomfortable. And that's okay. Some people can do that. Some people can consume media related to things that are going on in the world on a like fictional level. I can't unless it's on a non-fictional level. I can enjoy nonfiction in relation to me providing myself an education about a topic that may be contemporary. But in this case, I go to fiction because I don't really necessarily want to think about that stuff all the time. Or if I do, it's something that I'm emotionally preparing myself for. And in this case, I just couldn't do that. So I'm not going to tell you whether this is good or bad because I really don't know. I only got like maybe a quarter of the way through. But someone's supposed to eat brains in here. And I wish that I can enjoy that, but I can't. So this is going to be a no-go for me. I thought about pushing through, but my time is precious. And then the other book that I'm in the middle of is Glitch Feminism, which I cannot seem to find my copy of right now. It's somewhere in my house. Yeah, I adore Glitch Feminism. I've given it 5 stars. I mean, technically it's like I'm counting it as a third read, kind of. I did finish it in October, but then I'm like going back and annotating and a bunch of things because I want to give it an independent review video. And I love this book so much. And it's also one of those things where every time I read it, I get more questions because it really does inspire the art that I make. So that's a thing. And if you don't know what Glitch Feminism is about, it is a modern manifesto by a BIPOC author who is talking about being part of what was systemically and historically considered the minority, because statistically, since the minority is not the majority, it is not the basis of stability or the net neutral in which society kind of functions to achieve and therefore is a glitch. And in that case, how does one embrace the glitch in an era of technology when we have access to communication where we can sometimes have the ability to shed that with which gives others a preconceived notion of who we are that establishes their biases to create a level playing field for open communication and dialogue and like change, right, of those systems. So again, that needs its own review, and this is not the video for it, but I guess I'm going into my third review of it. I don't know, I'm obsessed with this book, and I'll talk about it when I'm ready. But anyway, so that's my wrap up for October. I have about 6 or 7 books on my November TBR that I'd like to get to, and I think that I will. I'm feeling a little less slumpy, but I'm also feeling very artsy, and that's taking up a lot of my time. I post videos whenever I feel like it because that's how my artistic brain works. I will see you later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
On we go.
What's it making, Mr. Wonka? Mr. Wonka worked the factory.
In your wildest,